So how many more ways do we have of playing that chord? Does anyone know? By a raise of hands, or just leave it in the comments. How many more ways? Yes? 12. No, that's incorrect. Anyone else? So, has anyone heard of the term caged? Anyone familiar with it? Caged? To play any chord, triad, inversion, extension, whatever you want, you only need... Hello and welcome to this presentation. For those who don't know me, my name is Dan Lopez. And I'm the founder and chief instructor at Learning Guitar Secrets. I appreciate Tom for having me here. Many of my students also call me Mr. Easy. And it's because of my mild, just slight obsession about making guitar easy and fun and bringing beginners up to speed so they can become confident players and start enjoying this beautiful instrument. Just to give you an example, and let me know if you can relate to this, on average it takes from 1 to 2 years for a beginner to start playing their first song. Well, in our academy, we make that possible in under an hour. Yeah, from zero, I've never played a guitar before, to playing a full song in under an hour. Let me know in the comments if you can relate to that story. How long did it take you to start playing guitar? I'll read through those later. I would like to start this presentation by asking all of you a question. Let me know in the comments if this is true. How many of you can confidently navigate the entire fretboard using cage? How many of you know where your triads are? Let me know. I see one person using cage. Okay. How about triads? Can you find any triad across the fretboard? Okay, yeah, so I see one person, 2 people using triads. Okay, how about chord theory and chord creation and extensions? Okay, cool. So not a lot of people. With what I'm seeing in the comments, I think you're absolutely gonna love this presentation. So here's my promise. When you watch this presentation, after going through what I'm about to teach you, you'll be able to find, fret and play any chord across the entire fretboard. You'll understand cage, triads, chord theory, extensions and variations, and you'll also know every note across the entire fretboard and why it's useful. Now, to make sure that everyone can follow along this presentation and benefit from it, we're gonna start right from the beginning. Deanna, my lovely wife, will later chop this presentation up and send it to you via email. And make sure to grab a copy of my best-selling book, The Ultimate Guitarist Chordbook. Deanna will be talking to you personally and letting you know where you can get that. Deanna, is there a way that we can like log into my computer and me show them with a screen share? Yeah? Yeah, let's do that. Okay, let's get started. Okay, hopefully you can all see this, my screen. Let's talk about chords. You probably were taught to learn chords the first day in order to play your guitars, right? And then you open up a chord book or you see those chord charts hanging on people's walls and you're like, my God, do I have to learn 1,000 chords? Like, how do people do this, right? So let's talk about what a chord really is. A chord is 2 or more tones or notes played together. So if I play this note over here on the 5th string, that's an A note, and that's a single tone, a single sound. But if I play another note and I play them together, now I have my simplest way to play a chord, 2 notes. Now it turns out most of the chords, let me draw an A chord shape over here. So these are the strings you're fretting, right? Most of us are familiar with this shape. These are the strings you're fretting. These 2 notes that I also drew are the open strings that you're playing. So most of the chords we know, those open chords they taught you the first day, are created by combining 3 notes together. And you might be thinking to yourself, wait a minute, there's 5 notes in this chord shape. Well, if I color these notes with colors, you'll see that it's only 3 notes in reality. So you see there's 3 colors. We've got red, we've got green, and we've got blue. There's 2 red notes. Those 2 notes are A notes, right? There's 2 green notes. These 2 notes are repeated. And there's only 1 blue note. Let's take a look at another example. For example, a C shape. So here's your common way to play a C shape, right? A C chord. And these 2 notes are left open. Now, if I color this C shape, you'll see again, we only have 3 colors, 3 notes. We've got 2 red notes. Those are C notes. We've got 2 blue notes and just 1 green note. All the chords you're mostly playing only contain 3 notes in their structure. Let's take a look at one of the most important notes inside of the structure, which is this one, the red note. That is what we call the root note. And it's called the root because it's the note that defines the name of the chord. So that note right there is a C note. And because this is a C note, this is a C chord. Let's take a look at the first chord I showed you. This note over here on the 5th string is an A note. That is our root. It is the note that defines the name of the chord we're playing. It's an A note, hence an A chord. So how many names are there in the musical alphabet to define the names of notes or chords? There's only 7, and they're extremely easy to remember because they're the same as the normal alphabet. We're gonna start in A, same as this note. And if there's 7 names, we're gonna go all the way up to G. And in between, just like the normal alphabet, we have the rest of the letters. So if I grab this note over here and start moving it across the fretboard, I'm gonna find all these letters. We start in A, then we move to B, C, D, E, F, G, and if I place it over here on the 12th fret, it's exactly the same note as this one over here. Anything beyond the 12th fret just repeats itself. A, B, C, and so on. So, you probably realize that I skipped some frets sometimes. So there's 7 names, but there's actually 12 notes. That's why I left the gap in between these letters. So what are the names of those 5 remaining notes? We're going to call them sharps. So if I get this note, and instead of jumping to B, I leave it over here in between A and B, I'm going to find an A sharp. Sharp meaning that it's 1 fret higher from A. After A sharp, I'm going to find a B, and then I'm going to find a C. And after C, in between C and D, there's also a gap. So the next note I'm going to find is going to be a C sharp. If I keep moving along, this is a D. In between D and E, there's also a gap. So this is going to be a D sharp. Again, sharp meaning 1 fret higher from the note we started with. If we keep moving along, that's going to be an E. Then from E to F, there's no gap. So this is going to be an F. From F to G, there's another gap. So this is going to be an F sharp. If we keep moving along, next one is going to be a G. And then we're very close to the 12th fret. So from G all the way back to A on the 12th fret, there's also a gap. And this note over here is going to become a G sharp, 1 fret higher from G. And then if we move 1 fret higher from that, we start in the musical alphabet again, A. So there you have it, all the 12 notes on the fretboard. A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp. But what about chords then? Do these names apply to chords too? Yes. Let's get this note and build an A chord around it. Remember, this is an A note. We're going to build an A chord around it. That's an A chord with that being our root, right? These are the 3 strings we're fretting, and these are the 2 notes left open. So if this note, that red note, if I moved it up 1 fret, it becomes an A sharp, correct? What do you think if instead of me moving just this red note, what do you think will happen if I move all the notes that create an A chord? If I move 1 note, it becomes another note. If I move 1 chord, it's going to become another chord. Exactly. As long as I move all the notes that belong to that original chord shape, this is going to become another chord. It's going to become an A sharp chord because that's an A sharp note. So let's see that again. 1 note becomes another note up the fretboard. 1 chord is going to become another chord. So how can we move these 2 notes that are left open in the original chord shape? Well, that is where we place our bar. That's the difference between an open chord and a bar chord. An open chord uses open strings, and a bar chord has no open strings. Those open strings become your bar. That's why I teach my beginners the first day that it's very important they don't think in chords, that they think in shapes. This is your A shape, and we're moving all the notes of that A shape across the fretboard to create all your other chords. So here we created an A sharp chord using an A shape. If we keep moving along the musical alphabet, we're gonna find a B chord, and then we're gonna find a C chord, and then a C sharp chord, and then a D chord, and then a D sharp chord, and then an E, and an F sharp, and a G, and a G sharp, and we're gonna find an A beyond the 12th fret. All major chords in the musical alphabet played with just one shape. Very important you start thinking in shapes. So how many shapes are there for you to play chords across the fretboard? Movable shapes that you can move across the fretboard to play any chord. Well, let's look at them. We already discovered we found this A shape, correct? So that's one shape we can use to move across the fretboard. How about an A sharp shape? Do we have an A sharp? Nah. How about a B shape? What is the common way to play B? It's using an A shape, right? It's using an A shape, 1, 2 frets up the fretboard with a bar behind it. So we don't have a B shape. What about a C shape? Do we have a C shape? Yes, sir. Isn't that your common way to play C? These two notes drawn in the diagram are the ones left open. These are the 3 strings you're fretting. Now remember, this one over here is our root because that's a C note. Let's keep moving higher in the musical alphabet. So do we have a C sharp shape? We don't. Do we have a D shape? We do. Those are the 3 strings you're fretting, and this one is your root note because that's a D note. Let's keep moving higher in the musical alphabet. D sharp, do we have a shape for that? No. Do we have a shape for E? Yes, we do. These are the 3 strings you're fretting, and these are the 3 strings left open. Now this one, hint, your root note is always on the thickest string that you're playing, is your root note because that's an E note. Let's keep moving along. So do we have an F shape? What's your common way to play F? So that's your E shape right there in open position, right? Open chord using open strings. If we move all the notes that create that E shape 1 fret higher in the musical alphabet, it's going to become from E to F. Isn't that your common way to play F? Those 3 fretted strings plus a bar behind it? That's still an E shape 1 fret higher up the fretboard. And of course, your thickest string, the one on the 6th string, is your root note because that now is an F note instead of an E note. Still the same shape, different chord. Okay, let's keep moving. Do we have an F sharp shape? We don't. Well, how about a G shape? Yes, we do. These are the 3 strings you're fretting, and these are the 3 strings left open, with the thickest string being your root note because that's a G note. So we only have 5 shapes that we can move across the fretboard. For example, let's use, I don't know, the C shape and start moving it across the fretboard. You'll see it follows the musical alphabet. We're starting in C. If we move all the notes that create that C chord 1 fret higher, what's it going to become? A C sharp, right? And you know it's a C sharp because that note is a C sharp. A sharp, B, C, C sharp. If we move it 1 fret higher from there, what's it going to become? We're on a C sharp. If we move all these notes again, it's going to become a D. It's still a C chord shape. That's why it's important we think in shapes. But that shape is now creating a D chord because this note is a D note. Let's count. A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D. Following the musical alphabet, we started in C, over here, C sharp, D. And of course, we can keep moving this shape across the fretboard to create all the other chords. Any one of these chords Some are easier to move than others and easier to fret, but if you move any one of these chords across the fretboard, you're going to create all these major chords. So let me get these chords and rearrange them to spell something different. I'm going to grab the C shape and put it here, the A shape and put it here, the G shape and put it here, the E shape and put it here, and the D shape and put it here. What does this spell now? Cage. Oh wow, so we're getting onto something, right? All right, so let's see how cage works and what it's telling us. So remember, these every one of these 5 diagrams is a shape that you can move across the fretboard to find any major chord, right? If we move a C, we start in C, the next chord is going to be a C sharp, the next chord is going to be a D, the next one a D sharp, and so on. If we move an A, we start in A, 1 fret higher is going to be an A sharp, 2 frets higher is going to be a B, 3 frets higher is going to be a C, and the notes that are left open is where we place our bar. Now, some of these shapes are easier to move than others, and we're going to talk about that further in the video. But let's start, for example, let's say you want to find all C chords. So obviously we're going to start in our open position with a C chord shape. And we know it's a C because that's a C note. A sharp, B, C. And that shape gives us a C chord. So what Cage is telling us is the next shape of these 5 shapes we can use to find a C chord. What is the next shape in Cage? A. Well, let's see if that is true. That is an A shape played in open position, giving me an A chord. But if I start moving it, it should give me a C chord, which is the next shape in Cage. How many frets do I have to move that A chord shape, all the notes in the A chord shape, across the fretboard, higher in pitch, to find a C? 1, 2, 3. So let's move this chord shape 3 frets, see if we find a C chord. 1, 2, 3 frets, and that right there is a C note, A sharp, B, C, giving me a C chord, which is the next shape in Cage, right? We first used the C shape, and now we're using an A shape. So following Cage, what is the next shape that we're going to use to find a C chord? Remember, we're using these 5 shapes to find C chords. Well, it's a G shape. That's your G shape played in open position, giving you a G chord, and we want to find C. So how many frets do we have to move that G shape to reach C? Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets to find a C chord. This right here is a C chord. It's using a G shape, but it's a C chord. Now, following Cage, what is the next shape to find a C chord? E. So that's your E chord shape played in open position, giving you an E chord. How many frets do we have to move it till we find C? I know I'm moving slowly through this, but I want everyone to grasp this concept because it's going to allow you to understand triads and to understand everything else. So this is an E. How many frets do we have to move E up the fretboard, up the musical alphabet till we find C? Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 frets. So let's move that E chord shape 8 frets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That right there is a C chord, but it's using an E shape. And following Cage, which is the last chord shape that we can use to find a C chord, the last way is using a D shape. Now, D shape played open is a D chord. How many frets do we have to move that chord shape up the fretboard, up the musical alphabet, higher in pitch, till we find C? Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'm going to move that C shape. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that right there is your last way to play a C chord using caged. First, we use the C shape, then we used the A shape, then we used the G shape. Cage then told us that the next shape we can use is E. And if we follow Cage, the last shape we can use to play a C chord is D. But what happens if the first chord we're starting out is G? We want to find all G chords across the fretboard using Cage. It doesn't start in C, it starts in G. So let's start with the G open chord shape. Remember, now we're finding G chords. This is where we're starting, right? And we want to figure out all G chords across the fretboard using Cage. So the next shape in Cage is going to be E. So I'm going to move E till I find G. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. That right there is a G chord, but it's using an E shape. The next shape using Cage is D. So I'm going to move a D shape till I find G, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets apart from D. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That right there is a G chord, but using in a D shape. Now, the next shape we have to use, there's no more shapes. Cage ended. Well, we just start in the beginning. The next shape we're going to use is a C shape. So we're using a C shape. We want to find G. How many frets? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's move that C shape 7 frets up the fretboard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That right there is a G chord, but it's using a C shape. And the last shape we can use to play a G chord is an A shape. And how many frets are we going to move that A shape till we find G? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're going to move that A shape 10 frets up the fretboard till we find G. Now these 5 shapes, not only do they have 1 ret note, some of them have 2 or 3 ret notes. Let me show you. In a C shape, these 2 notes are C notes. In an A shape, these 2 notes are A notes. In a G shape, these 3 notes are G notes, and so on, right? So why is this important? Just imagine we find this note over here, and we treat it as a ret note, as a root note. Well, now we could build a chord around that note. So for example, this is a ret note. What shapes of Cage have a ret note on the 5th string? All right, so we've got a C shape, so I can build a chord around that, and that's going to give me that chord. But there's also an A shape, so I could build an A shape around that note, and that's also going to give me that chord. Let's imagine you find another note. This one right here. And we treat that, we want to play not a note, we want to play a chord, and we treat it as a root note. Well, now I can easily play that chord if I look at my Cage shapes. So what shapes have that root note on the 3rd string? An A shape, so I'm going to build an A shape around that note to play that chord. But I also know that my G shape has that note as a root note too. So I can build a G shape around that note and play that chord too. So how can you know what chord this is? I think you only need to know the names of the notes on the 5th string. Let me explain. Okay, before we move on to this, let me know in the comments if you're getting this, if this is useful. And if there's any questions, we'll open up Q&A at the end so that you get any question answered, okay? So the beautiful thing about guitar is that it repeats itself. Let me demonstrate. So I'm going to place 2 notes here. I'm going to color them different just so you can see they're 2 different notes, right? If we treat guitar, instead of looking at our guitars as 6 strings, we can divide them into pairs of strings. So strings 6 and 5, 4 and 3, 2 and 1. 3 pairs of strings. Now, anything you find on 6 and 5 is going to repeat in exactly the same order on 4 and 3. But you need to jump 2 frets. So this note is going to be found on these 2 strings 2 frets apart. 1, 2, just like that. And this note right below it, it's exactly the same sequence. So let me color that red. right there. See how they're the same two notes, black and red, 2 frets apart. Now, the last pair of strings, it's 3 frets apart from that, right? So I'm gonna, again, color the same notes, the same, 1, 2, 3, and I'm gonna jump to that pair of strings and place those 2 notes right there. So why is this useful? Well, imagine you find any note on the fretboard. Let's just make it easy and choose that note because that's an A note. Well, now I can find all A notes on the fretboard if I follow this principle. So I'm on string 6 and 5, I'm on an odd string, and to jump to 4 and 3, I'm gonna jump 2 frets, right? 1, 2, and I'm gonna place that note on an odd string 2, which is 3. 5 and 3 are odd strings, right? 2 frets apart, odd string. Now I can jump to this pair of strings, 2 and 1, by bouncing 3 frets. 1, 2, 3, and again I'm on an odd string, so I'm gonna place it right there. All those 3 notes are A notes. So how do I find them on the even strings? String 6, 4, and 2. Well, if you tune your guitar regularly, you'll know that this string, the 6th string, and the 1st string share notes. They're both E notes when you tune your guitar, right? So I can bounce this note here, and it's also going to be an A note. And just to confirm, we started with an E note over here, and if we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in our musical alphabet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A note. Easy, right? So now I'm on this pair of strings. To jump to the middle pair of strings, 2 frets, remember? 1, 2, I'm on an even string, I place it right there. And now to jump to strings 2 and 1, it's 3 frets, so I'm on 1, 2, 3, again, even string, just like that. And I could also bring this note, which is on the 0 fret open string, over here to the 12th fret. And just like that, I have all my A notes across the fretboard. What's cool now is that I already showed you that all of these are root notes. So now I can build a chord on whatever note I found. So for example, let's choose this one. I'm going to build a chord just like that, using what shape? My E shape, right? And that's going to be an A chord because this is an A note. All these 3 notes are A notes, and I'm using an E shape. Let's choose another one. Let's choose this one. Well, I can build that chord right there using a C shape, right? But that's going to be an A chord. I'm using a C shape, but I know that's my root. So now I can build that chord using a C shape. I could also build it like this, using a D shape, just like this, right? I know that's my root note from my D shape, and I can build that chord if I know that note. And the reason I'm telling you that it's cool to know all the notes on the A string, on the 5th string, is because imagine you find, I don't know, this note over here. What note is that? Well, we can reverse engineer what I just taught you about the 2-string approach and find that note on the 5th string. So to jump from 2 and 1 to 3 and 4, remember it's 3 frets, 1, 2, 3. I'm on an even string, so I'm going to place it here. Now to jump to 5 and 6, it's 2 frets, 1, 2. I'm on an even string right there. And now I can bounce this note over here and keep going on. 1, 2, 3. Bounce it to an odd string. 1, 2. Bounce it again. And now if you know your notes on your A string, what note is that? This is an A, that's an A sharp. And now I can build any A sharp chord because I know all these notes. For example, I could use this note and create a chord around that, right? I could create this chord, for example. What shape is that? That's a G shape. It's an A sharp chord, but it's using a G shape. Or I could build this chord, right? It's still an A sharp chord, but it's using an E shape. Okay, so till now we've been discovering how to find all major chords across the entire fretboard. We use Cage, we use the two-string approach to find our root notes, and then we build chords around them. But what about minor chords? What's the difference between a major chord and a minor chord? A major chord sounds happy and uplifting, and a minor chord sounds sad and kind of depressing. Both beautiful chords, but they have different tonal qualities. And what is the difference between those chords? Let's take A as an example and look at the difference between A major and A minor. I'm going to color this note blue so you can see what happens. This is an A major chord and this is an A minor chord. The only difference between major chords and minor chords is that blue note. Let's take a look at another example. For example, an E shape. If I blow it up, which is the note that makes an E major chord and turns it into an E minor chord? It's this one over here, the blue note. If I move that note 1 fret lower in pitch, it creates a minor chord, an E minor. And this happens for all chords. All chords have blue notes. For example, this D shape over here also has a blue note, which is this one. And if I move it 1 fret lower, it creates a D minor chord in open position. I like to think of minor chords as minorizing the blue note. I'm subtracting a fret to the blue note, right? This is a major chord, and if I subtract the fret to that blue note, I create a minor chord. Plus major, minus minor. So from those 5 shapes we have to play any chord across the fretboard, where are our blue notes? Let's check it out. So here they are. Now, you probably noticed that we don't have a C minor or a G minor chord shape. And why is that? Well, if we need to move the blue note 1 fret lower, check out the C chord shape. Are there any more frets that we can move the blue note? All blue notes have to move. Not only one, we have to move the 2 blue notes in that C shape. Now we could move this one 1 fret lower, but we can't move this one 1 fret lower because there's no more frets. Same happens with the G shape. Look at that, 2 blue notes. We could move this one, but we can't move this one because there's no more frets. That's why you don't have a C minor shape or a G minor shape. But when we're talking about triads, things are different. So let's build, for example, all D shapes across the fretboard and then turn them into minors. There's several ways we can do this. We can start with a D shape in open position, use Cage to build all D chords. We could also use the 2-string approach, finding a D note on the 5th string and building chords around all the notes we find, which I think is the method I'm going to use because it's just so much fun. So remember, we're looking for D notes. So we'll start with A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D. Now I'm going to use the 2-string approach to bounce that note across the fretboard and find all my root notes. Okay, so from here, 2 frets, I jump here. Now it's 3 frets, 1, 2, 3. I jump here and then I jump here. And then 1, 2, I jump here. Now this note is the same as this note because that's the 12th fret, which is the same as the 0 fret. And now I'm here, I'm going to jump 3 frets, 1, 2, 3, and locate it here. So now I've found all my D notes and I can start building chords around them. So I'm going to start here behind the nut and build a D chord around it. Like here, now I'm going to choose this note and build a D chord around it using a C shape. Now I'm going to choose this note and build a D chord around it using an A shape. Right? This one right here. And then, I don't know, I'm going to choose this note and use a G shape to build that chord. Remember, we're building D chords, and now I'm going to use this note again and use an E shape. And now I found all the ways I can play a D chord using my 5 shapes. But remember, we're looking for minor chords now. So now I need to color with blue notes those shapes. So I'm just going to choose all my blue notes. Just like that. If I want to create minor chords, what does the blue note have to do? It has to minorize. We have to subtract the fret, but we're going to subtract the fret to all blue notes, because remember, we found all ways to play a D chord, but we want to play a D minor chord. So let's do that right now. I'm going to move all my blue notes at once, 1 fret lower in pitch. And just like that, you have different ways you can play a D minor. And why did I do it all at once? Well, if you look at this, what is a triad? What does a triad mean? Tri means 3. So if we recap, any basic major or minor chord is created out of 3 notes. So if we have 3 colors in our diagrams, any combination of those 3 colors should give us a triad, correct? So let's take a look at, for example, whatever, this chord shape over here. Let's expand it. Do we have 3 colors inside of this chord shape? Yes, we do. So any combination of these 3 colors should give us a way to play this chord. Right? This is an E chord. Okay, in open position. So we've got strings 1, 2, and 3. That is going to give us a triad. Wow. So we don't always have to play all 6 strings. We can choose what strings to play, and this is what the pros do, and they know that you didn't, but now you know. So strings 1, 2, and 3 is going to give us a triad. Strings 2, 3, and 4, we have those 3 colors inside. That's going to give us another triad. Strings 3, 4, and 5 is going to give us another triad. Now we found 3 ways of playing that chord. Now let me ask you this question. Would string 6, 5, and 4 give us a triad? How many colors are there? 2 colors. That's not a triad. Technically, that's not a triad. That's another thing. So coming back to our trusty diagram over here, we now know we're playing D minor chords. We found all the notes that create D minor chords. Where are our triads? Let's go string by string. So I'm going to choose strings 1, 2, and 3. And I found 3 colors right there. So that right there, excuse I'm using my mouse, is a little triad. That's a D minor triad. It's a full chord. Now it does sound thinner because you're only using 3 strings instead of 4, 5, or 6, but it's still a full D minor chord. The 3 notes that create that chord are included. Let's keep going. So I can find this little triad over here, right? We've got the 3 colors, and I can find this little triad right here. So I found 3 ways using triads to play a D minor chord. Let's check out, for example, strings 2, 3, and 4. Is this a triad right here? No, it's only 2 colors, so I gotta look for something else. How about this over here? Is that a triad? Yep, 3 colors. Is this a triad? Yes, it is, 3 colors. Let's see what else I find. Is this a triad? It is a triad, 3 colors. Awesome, let's do one more, just so you see how it works. So let's check out 3, 4, and 5, for example. Is this a triad? Yes, sir, that's a triad, 3 colors. Is this a triad? Yes, it is. Again, the 3 colors. And is this a triad? Yes, it is. So those are your minor triads for a D minor chord. But let's just say you want to find your major triads. Well, very simple. What's the difference between a minor chord and a major chord? That blue note moves 1 fret higher or 1 fret lower, right? We were playing minor chords, and now we want to play major chords. So again, I'm going to move this. I'm going to make it a plus, a major chord. Now we have all the ways we can play a D major chord, and I want to find my triads. Again, I'm going to use consecutive strings just to make things easy. This is going to be one of my triads. This is going to be another one of my triads. This is going to be another one of my triads, right? If I use strings 2, 3, and 4, for example, this is not a triad, only 2 colors. But this is a triad, just like that, just like that, and just like that is another triad. Now, does this mean that you can only play 3 strings? No. You could, of course, choose to play this part of the chord, or you could choose to play this part of the chord, right? Or maybe something weirder. You could choose to play this part of the chord, or you could choose to play these 4 strings, right? As long as you have all 3 colors included, you're going to play that chord independently of how many strings you're using. As long as you have those 3 colors, it's a full-blown chord. Now, there's another cool thing you can do to any chord you find. Let's, for example, grab this chord and start transforming that chord into other things. So, for example, you already discovered that to go from major chords to minor chords, you move that blue note, right? But if I keep moving that blue note 1 fret lower from there, I'm going to create a sus2 chord, which sound absolutely beautiful. Now, because I mapped out all my D chords, all the possible ways I could play a D chord, what if I want to play a D sus2 chord? Well, I already know the formula, which is moving the blue note instead of 1 fret lower, I move it 2 frets lower. So I'm going to get that blue note, all the blue notes I found, and I'm going to move them 1, 2 frets lower in pitch. And just like that, you found all the ways you can play a D sus2 chord or D sus2 triads. Check them out, right? Remember, 3 colors is a triad, and I can keep going. But there's more things you can do to these chords which sound absolutely amazing, and it's moving that blue note again 1 fret higher in pitch instead of lower to create sus4 chords. Now, we already mapped out all D chords, and you can do this for any chord. I'm going to grab all those blue notes, move them 1 fret higher to find all my D sus4 chords. And of course, I could also find my D sus4 triads the same exact way. Now, inside of the Ultimate Guitarist Chordbook, you'll discover how to create major 7, 7, 6, 5, diminished, augmented chords, and how to find triads for that. So here you have it, the Ultimate Guitarist Chordbook. Let me see if I can find that page. Well, let me show you everything included. So this book is for everyone. Starts right in the beginning, how to read chord charts, right? And the concept of chords versus shapes, what we were talking about. Okay, and then we've got your basic chord shapes, all those colors, see those red notes? Okay, so then how to transform your shapes, how to fret them cleanly, how to change through chord shapes with tips, with videos, and then we've got finger stretching exercises. What else do we have? How to change those chords, you already know, into other beautiful sounding chords just by moving a couple notes. What else do we have over here? Easy chord progressions. You can play right away. If you're struggling to change through chords, these things sound amazing. We also have bar chords, how they work, how to make them sound clean, how they're laid out across the fretboard, how to change to them fast, sharps, and flats, what we were talking about, right? Easy bar chord checklist. What else do we have here? We have cage, how it's laid out, how it works, how chords move across the fretboard, and how to identify cage, how to use it. Okay, what else do we have? Triads. See those colors? Well, if you know your colors, you already know your triads, which is really cool. And then using cage, you can find any triad across the fretboard. We've got chord theory. So how to create chords such as majors, minors, sus chords, 5 chords, 7 chords, major 7, 6, augmented, diminished, add chords. All chords are here included. Look at those colors. Okay, so what else do we have here? Let's see. Chord voices by genres. What common genres of music use to get their sound? We also have chord progression theory, the circle of fifths and how it works, how to use it, how to create your own chord progressions. We've got minor chord progressions. Let's see what else we've got. We also have a chord library, how to fret your chords, open chords, bar chords, triads. All this is included inside of the Ultimate Guitarist Chordbook. Go and check it out. I promise it'll change your life. Yeah, great question. So sus means suspended, but you can also think of it as substitute, right? So for example, let's get an A shape and the difference between A and A minor is that one note, right? That gives it the flavor, 2 different flavors, happy and sad. Now, in suspended chords, we're gonna substitute that note for another note, either this one or this one. Remember? So they don't either sound or major or minor. They sound kind of like unresolved. And I love these chords to create a little intro, for example, right? So I could go major, chord, to sus2, to sus4, to major again. And create a little intro with that. They sound unresolved and kind of mystical. They're beautiful chords. Yeah, so I get your question. The more you work through this and the more you use it, the easier it's going to become. Like most people, if I tell them play me a C chord, they can fret a C chord, right? Or if I tell them play me a G chord, they've done it so many times that they know where it is instantly, right? So this is just an approach to help you find any chord, and I recommend my students like getting blank sheets of fretboard and just mapping things out. So for example, let's just say you want to play an A chord, but you don't want to play it here, somebody else is playing it here, or you're jamming to a backing track and you want to navigate the fretboard, right? So I'm going to start with that A note, and I'm going to look for another A note using the 2-string approach, and I'm going to look for another A note here, and I'm just going to try to move up the fretboard. I'm going to find this note again. So now I've got that note. That's an A note too, right? So now using the Kate shapes, if I know that's a root, I can build this shape around it. That's an E shape, or I can use this shape. Really uncomfortable, but again, I probably only use the middle strings 2, 3, 4, and 5 instead of the entire shape, right? So now I've got 2 ways to play an A chord, right? Now I played this one so many times. If you tell me play me an A chord using an E shape, I'm instant. I know this is B, I know this is C, right? I use that shape constantly. This shape maybe not so much, but the more you use it, the more you'll get used to it and the more intuitive it's gonna be. But you need a place to start to map your fretboard out and be able to locate your chords, if that makes sense. Yeah, great question. I remember when I first heard about the concept of triads, I was like, yeah, but how do you use it? So really good question. So let's come back to the previous question. I was gonna play an A chord and I'm using an E shape right here, right? So my triads are here, they're here, and they're here. Okay, so how can we use triads? So you're probably not going to use triads if you're playing by yourself. You're probably going to be wanting to use triads to create a little intro, to play over somebody else, like if they're playing open chords and just strumming through that chord, or to create a little line underneath what somebody else is playing, right? So for example, you could choose, if I'm going to choose this little triad over here, you could choose to play individual strings. Or you could strum through it and create like a little stuff like that, right? Or you could create like a little intro and then jump to your strumming, right? For example, there's just so many ways you can use triads. You can also use them in solos and stuff like that. But yeah, basically you want to create something different that adds up to the music that you're hearing or you're playing to, instead of just adding mud. If you play that full chord and somebody's playing this, it's so similar that it's just going to add more sound instead of more music, if that makes sense. Yeah, other chords. Okay, so major 7 chords, you mean something like this, right? So yeah, there's, same as we move the blue note 1 fret lower to create a minor chord, or 2 frets lower to create a sus2 chord, or 1 fret higher to create a sus4, we can also move the ret note that is not the root note. So for example, in an A shape, I'm going to move that ret note of the A shape, and I'm going to move it 1 fret lower to create a major 7. Beautiful sounding chords, major 7 chords. They add a little bit of tension and a lot of color to the mix, right? And if I move that ret note again 1 fret lower from there, I'm going to create a 7 chord, which adds a lot of tension, commonly used in blues and stuff like that, right? So just by moving different notes inside of your chord shape, you start getting other chords which are beautiful. And of course, you can combine everything together. So for example, let's just say we're playing that A major. If I move to an A sus4, sorry, creates that mystical unresolved sound. But then I also move the ret note 1 fret lower. I'm combining both formulas together, the major 7 formula and the sus4 formula, to create an A major 7 sus4. Beautiful, right? Or I could create an A major 7 sus2, or just a plain A major 7. Which sounds amazing for intros, to create a lot of texture in your songs, in your chord progressions. Just a beautiful thing, and it's just moving a couple notes. Yeah, I found a few examples of really weird chords and really weird finger positions that are hard to relate to the 5 chord shapes I taught you, but like 99.99% of all the chords you'll ever play can be broken down into these 5 shapes and just moving a couple notes till you find the chord you want.